Thank you, Juan, we were originally planning to talk about Bibi Netanyahu and his court appearance today, but some major news came in on Friday, and we had to totally flip the switch, flip the script. So why don't you get started? Tell us, what is your reaction to this news?
Well, first of all, Shana, thank you very much for having me here today. It's an honor.
You're
So my
welcome.
react. So I'm actually quite not surprised at all with what has happened and we witnessed this weekend, because the Attorney General, Mrs. Fatou Bensouda, she has had her eye on Israel for a long time, since she's been on this position for some time. And the only thing that I'm quite surprised, to be honest with you, is the language that was used on the original text by the judges, who openly stated this weekend that the court's territorial jurisdiction extended to the territories occupied by Israel since 1967. So, in fact, by saying that, they're saying that Israel it's occupying those territories. And the only concern that I have with that is that it's more political than a judicial statement coming from a court. Other than that, I think that the main objection that I would have with what's going on is the ICC's mandate is to prosecute people and not states, and this is more targeted towards the Jewish and the only Jewish state, which is Israel, and it's directly targeted to them, not just directly to people. So we just have to wait and see how things develop, but and we'll see how this will take many years for sure.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you ended on that note because this has been some years in the making. Do you know how many years that this has sort of been stewing and brewing underneath the surface?
So Mrs. Bensouda, she actually started to have her eye on Israel for the past 2 years, more or less, since 2018, 2019, when she officially said that she thought that there were serious proof to like condemn Israel for war crimes, and not only Israel but also Hamas, which is important to say because many people are saying that it's just Israel, the state of Israel, but it's also important to say that it's also for Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority in that sense is very happy, obviously, because they're seeing how their two enemies basically are going to suffer from that, and they may benefit. So around 2 years, more or less, I would say, since she was
Okay.
appointed the Attorney General.
Very interesting. And she's also going to be handing over her seat to the next person that comes in and takes it. So that's going to be happening. So we'll have to see what the next judge decides to do with this. But in the meantime, it's alive and it's well, it's on the table. And it's also very interesting that you mentioned that the Palestinian Authority will actually benefit from this case, being that Hamas is being considered the culprit. So it's kind of maybe a relief for them to have an outside objective, or so it's supposed to be objective, figure saying that Hamas needs to be held accountable. So that's sort of something that we haven't really heard on the international stage before. So that's very interesting. Now, what would you say is going to be the real implication for Israel following this news?
Yes. So first of all, it's important that people know that Israel has not signed the international treaty known as the Rome Statute, which the Palestinian Authority did many years ago, and they claim obviously that the ICC, in this regard, they do not have any jurisdiction over them. It's a legitimate claim on Israel's behalf, as any other country that doesn't adhere to a statute. So that's completely legitimate. First of all. Second of all, this will take a very long time before the investigations turn into formal indictments against specific individuals, because as I said before, this is not against the state of Israel per se, it's more against certain people, and we'll have to see against who. I'm assuming it will be against people, obviously, in the IDF. In that sense, Mr. Gantz was the head of the IDF many years ago with the war in Gaza 7 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But the former ICC chief prosecutor said this past morning, actually, that the investigation could take up to 2 years, at least, just the investigation before there is any formal indictment. So people need to know that this is not going to take 2-3 weeks or a couple of months. It will take many years for sure.
So
Yes.
Well, I want to just stop you right there. Does that mean that there hasn't been any investigating prior to this moment? Because it seems with the claims that come out that there would be some research and investigation preliminarily completed. Or is that the case? Or do you believe that it just took 2 years just to even be able to make the claim? And how does research play in?
So basically, the Attorney General 2 years ago, she submitted a file saying that she thought there was enough evidence to find that Israel was guilty of war, of committing crime wars. But that's what she said 2 years ago. That's what she released. And what we did see this past weekend is that the panel of the ICC is composed by 3 judges. Out of those 3 judges, 2 of them said that there were, based on the Attorney General's petition, there were enough evidence found to prosecute possibly not Israel, but some of the members of the country of Israel, in this case, the IDF. And there was 1 judge that dissented. So basically what has happened now is that the judges have basically given the green light for this to go on. Whereas before it was just merely and not even an investigation. It was just the Attorney General saying that she had enough evidence against the state of Israel. Whereas now we have 2 judges out of the 3 judges that are sitting on the panel saying that there's enough evidence for this to go on.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that to us, because for me, from a journalistic standpoint, when I hear you say that we're going to expect another 2 years of investigations, I'm thinking to myself, hasn't that been done already? Don't they have, but the judicial process really takes so long. And I suppose that you need to have certain things in place, certain judges to make certain decisions before you even can proceed with those investigations. So thanks for explaining that. Now, why is this happening now? And why is the ICC not condemning other regimes that are doing heinous war crimes to their own people? For example, a civil war that's happening in Syria, North Korea, Venezuela. There are war crimes that are happening all throughout the world. But from what I always say, the Israel-Palestinian conflict is trendy. And it is a trendy thing to talk about, and people want to jump on the bandwagon, and not to delegitimize the claims here, but why is this coming out and there aren't other investigations similar to this one being targeted to other tough regimes around the globe?
That is indeed the big question that everyone, including myself, is asking. Why just against the state of Israel and not all of these authoritarian, totalitarian regimes? Why not China, for example, with the Uyghur population that it is in re-education camps, as China says, which, in other words, they're basically concentration camps. And we have been seeing many images, especially in this past year, of people being put in place into these concentration camps. And this should remind us of something that happened only 80 years ago.
Absolutely.
Why?
We covered that on this show, by the way. We covered that multiple times on this show because it really is a big thing that needs more attention immediately. And I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Completely. And later, another case that I would like to talk about is Myanmar. What about the Rohingya population, the Muslim population that they have, in which, according to the UN, around 700,000 people, 700,000, close to 1 million people, have had to flee the country due to the discriminatory laws, including one of them such as exclusionary citizenship laws. What about that? And I could go on and on with many other dictatorships around the globe and how they have no respect at all for the minorities and their human rights, whereas in the state of Israel, 20% of the population is Muslim and they have the same equal rights as any other one. As Netanyahu said the other day, I think the ICC has become a political institution more and more rather than a judicial one, which is very sad, especially as someone that studies laws to see that. And I would like to draw the parallelism with the UN, because there's something, as you said before, the ICC indeed has a lot of connections with the UN. And I would like to say that the UN has condemned Israel 17 times in this past year, in this 2020, versus 6 times for the rest of the world combined. Also, the UNHRC, which is the Human Rights Council, condemnations for 2006, between 2006 and 2021, for these past 15 years, Guess what? Israel, 90 times has been condemned. Russia, 0. Venezuela, 2. Pakistan, 0. Qatar, 0. China, 0. I could go on and on. But do you see this parallelism? Is it me, or is everyone else saying that Israel is more condemned than any other state around the globe? Why is that?
That is really, really shocking. Those numbers are very shocking to hear. I mean, I've heard the numbers before, but when you put it, when you go from 90 to 0, especially 0 in Russia, when journalists have been thrown off the roof in Russia for speaking out, for writing the truth, when people are speaking out in Russia and they're taken in the middle of the night, never to be seen again.
The leader of the opposition with Navalny, as we did see, that as soon as he landed in Russia, he was in jail, and now he's officially in jail along with his wife, and he's going to be there for 2-3 years. We have no idea, just because he just wanted to basically use his freedom of expression and say, hey, we do have a problem here in Russia. This is not a democracy as Mr. Putin is presenting it. And just for saying that out loud, he's being thrown out to jail. And no one is saying about that. Where's the UN in all of this? Where's the ICC in all of this?
So I definitely think that this is something to consider. And if you are not comfortable with calling it anti-Semitism, then that's quite all right, because I understand the implications of that. But when you are looking at a situation like this, you're seeing all of the condemnations against the only Jewish state in the whole world, and 0 condemnations in a country that is in the international headlines every week for its civil rights issues. It's really hard not to call it that, but that's not for us to decide. So today we're actually, what we really came to the table for initially, and the way that we got introduced, was to talk about Bibi Netanyahu's trial. Now, today is his second appearance in court for breach of trust, bribery. He has been accused of taking very large gifts. We're talking about fine wines, we're talking about cigars, whatever those are. And people have said that it was a form of bribery. In addition to that, there have been a lot of Israeli news outlets that are under fire for coordinating, working with the prime minister to provide coverage that would put him in a better light than what was maybe actually deserved. So let's just really briefly get back to there. What's the news there, and what should we expect moving forward in his trial?
So first of all, it's important to say that today he has officially confirmed, according to his lawyers, verbally, that he denies, obviously, the corruption charges as he was expected. And he has asked the court for 3 to 4 month delay to the start of the obedientiary stage. Why is that? There's elections around the corner, as we all know, in a month and a half. And obviously he doesn't want to be seen sitting in front of a panel of 3 judges, because this is exposing his image even more. We'll have to see what happens with that, because the court decides, as always. So Bibi is facing charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, which are quite serious things. And he could face a total of 10 years in prison as a maximum penalty, which is quite a lot. The 3 cases, just in a very brief and concise way, the 3 cases are case 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000. In the case 1,000, as you have said, he has been involved in what the Attorney General has seen Bibi illicitly accepting expensive gifts from his friends, with some around 1 million shekels. For those that may not know, shekels like between $200,000 and $300,000 more or less, which is quite a lot of money. Later, case 2000, which is a little bit more serious, in which Bibi is accused of attempting to reach a quid pro quo with Aaron Motzes, who is the Yediot Ahronot published paper, in which he pursued to get more positive media coverage in exchange for legislating in the Knesset to weaken the rival Israel Hayom. And the most serious case is this case 4000, in which it is alleged again that Bibi granted regulatory favors to his friend Shaul Elovitch, controlling shareholder of Betzek Telecom, in exchange for, once again, more positive coverage for him, not only for him, but also for his family in the Walla News side. We can expect this to take many years. Same with the ICC thing that we just talked about. This is going to take many years. And there's a precedent in which, for those that may not know, Ehud Olmert, who was former prime minister, in the case in which he was indicted in 2009 and was convicted in 2015 and did start serving his sentence in 2016. So it was a total of 7 years. So I don't expect this to go on just for a couple of months or a couple of years. It will take many more. And by that time, maybe Mr. Netanyahu will still be the prime minister of Israel.
Well, thank you for unpacking all of that. You have done it in such a concise way. You explained it Tachlis, as I said. I wanted to call today Tachlis politics, which means direct, straight to the point. And, only the commentary that gets you better informed. And so, Juan, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it. We appreciate somebody breaking it down, giving us the truth, and being also able to take a look at things with perspective to what else is going on in the world, especially in terms of the International Criminal Court. Don't forget, it is the International Criminal Court, meaning that they need to take a look at everybody. So thank you so much for zeroing in here on Israel and being with us.
Thank you so much for everything, Shana. Have a good one.
You as well.